The moment I pulled my boat up to the dock, I could already feel the eyes on me. It wasn't just curiosity, it was that sharp, disapproving glare that only an HOA can deliver. I had just settled into what I thought would be a peaceful life by the lake, ready to enjoy some quiet weekends out on the water, when the knock came at my door. Standing there was a group of HOA board members, clipboards in hand, acting like they owned not just the neighborhood, but the lake itself. Without so much as a hello, they told me I had to move my boat immediately. Apparently, they had rules about where and how boats could be kept, and they were quick to remind me that I wasn't above them. At first, I thought it was just a misunderstanding. After all, I wasn't blocking anyone, and the boat was well within my property line. But the tone in their voices wasn't friendly. It was commanding, almost threatening, as if they expected me to give in without a word. The neighbors started peeking out from their windows, watching the whole scene unfold like it was entertainment. The HOA members leaned in, confident they had the upper hand, telling me this was their lake, their rules, and that I'd better comply or face the consequences. What they didn't know, and what I hadn't revealed yet, was the one detail that would flip this entire confrontation upside down. You see, I wasn't just another homeowner by the water. The title in my possession didn't just cover my cabin, it extended far further than they could have imagined. The very lake they claimed authority over wasn't theirs at all. And when the truth came out, it would leave them completely stunned. I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I let the HOA members talk, piling on their list of so-called violations. They pointed at my dock, at my boat cover, even at the way I had tied the ropes. Every detail seemed to bother them, as if the lake belonged only to their rules and not to the people who lived around it. I could see how comfortable they were in their routine, show up, intimidate, and expect compliance. But inside, I was holding back a small smile, because I knew something they didn't. As they kept talking, my mind went back to the paperwork I had reviewed before moving in. When I first saw the listing for this property, the words that stood out weren't just lakefront cabin. Buried deeper in the deed was something most buyers would have overlooked, a line that mentioned water rights and ownership extending across the body of the lake. It didn't sound real at first, so I had done my homework, checking county records and old documents. To my surprise, it was all true. The lake itself, the very one where families swam, fished, and docked their boats, had a title, and I was the one holding it. But standing there with the HOA, I kept that part quiet. Instead, I asked them polite questions, pretending to be uncertain, just to see how far they would go. The way they puffed themselves up, quoting bylaws and threatening fines, told me they had no idea what cards I was holding. Meanwhile, neighbors whispered from their porches, some looking uneasy, others clearly entertained by the unfolding standoff. The tension around that lakefront grew heavier with every word, and I knew the moment I revealed the truth, nothing in this neighborhood would ever feel the same again. The days that followed only added more fuel to the fire. Word spread quickly around the neighborhood that the HOA had confronted me about my boat, and soon, people I had never met were stopping by, curious about how it all played out. Some spoke in hushed tones, warning me that the board didn't let things go easily. Others, though, leaned in a little closer, quietly admitting they had their own frustrations with the HOA, but were too afraid to say anything out loud. It was clear this wasn't just about my boat. This was about control, and the HOA had been using that power for years. Every morning when I stepped outside, I noticed the small details that revealed more about the tension simmering beneath the surface. A neighbor's fence slightly over the property line, a shed built a little taller than regulations allowed, a kayak tied to the wrong post, things no one had dared to challenge before. It seemed like everyone had a story of being fined, warned, or embarrassed in front of the community. My boat was just the latest excuse, but it had exposed something bigger. The HOA's iron grip on the lake lifestyle everyone had come to enjoy. At the same time, I started getting letters slipped under my door. Some were anonymous notes of encouragement, thanking me for standing up to the board. Others carried warnings, telling me not to push back unless I wanted trouble. The split in the community became more obvious with each passing day. While the HOA kept pushing harder, demanding I move the boat or face penalties, I stayed quiet, letting the storm build. What no one yet knew was that I had the power to change everything, and the timing of that reveal would matter more than anything. The pressure finally came to a breaking point one evening when the HO called an emergency meeting at the community center. Word spread fast, and by the time I arrived, nearly every seat was filled. People were whispering, shifting uncomfortably, some clearly eager for a showdown. The board members sat at the front like judges, their clipboards stacked high, and the air was thick with expectation. They wasted no time calling me out by name, declaring that my refusal to move the boat was a violation of community standards and that penalties were about to escalate. I could feel the tension in the room, every eye locked on me. Some neighbors avoided eye contact, others stared as if waiting for me to fold under the pressure. The board spoke with confidence, throwing around numbers for fines, even threatening legal action. Their voices carried authority, but beneath the surface, I noticed a hint of nervousness. They were trying too hard to control the narrative, too eager to make an example of me. As they laid out their list of demands, I kept quiet, letting the silence stretch just long enough to unsettle them. The longer I waited, the more restless the crowd became. A few whispers grew louder, people shifting in their seats, murmuring about how unfair the whole process felt. Some even asked aloud why the HO was so fixated on my boat when bigger issues in the neighborhood had been ignored for years. The board tried to regain control, pounding the table and insisting on order, but the room was no longer theirs. I could feel the tide turning, the community beginning to question their authority. That was the exact moment I knew it was time. The truth I had been holding on to was ready to surface, and once I spoke, nothing about this lake, or the people who claimed to own it, would ever be the same. Just as I opened my mouth to finally speak, another voice cut through the room. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't one of the HO board members either. From the back of the community center, a tall man stood up, holding a folder stuffed with papers. The room fell silent as he walked to the front, his steps slow and deliberate. Without asking permission, he placed the folder on the table in front of the board and said, "Before you finish this meeting, maybe you should explain why these documents have been hidden from the homeowners for years." The crowd shifted, whispers buzzing again. The board members froze, their faces pale, clearly recognizing what he had brought. I didn't know who the man was at first, but it quickly became clear he was a neighbor, one who had clearly been digging into the HOA's records. He looked around the room, and then directly at me before saying, "Turns out your boat isn't the only problem they've been covering up." Everyone leaned forward as he pulled out copies of financial reports, showing unexplained expenses, missing funds, and projects that were billed to the community but never completed. Suddenly, the focus wasn't just on my boat anymore. It was on the people sitting at the front of the room, the same ones who had tried to corner me with rules and fines. The board members stumbled over their words, trying to brush it off, but the crowd wasn't buying it. Neighbors who had been silent until now started speaking up, angry voices cutting through the tension. I stood there, still holding back my own truth, watching the storm build higher than ever. The HO thought they were putting me on trial, but in that moment, it became clear the whole board might be the ones in real trouble. The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, neighbors shouting questions, demanding answers from the very board that had spent years enforcing their rules. The HO president slammed her hand on the table, trying to restore order, but the crowd was no longer listening. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I stood up slowly, letting the noise die down just enough before speaking. "I think it's time you all know the truth," I said, pulling out my own folder from under my arm. The board demanded I move my boat because they claimed the lake belongs to them. But according to this deed, it doesn't. I opened the folder and held up the paperwork, the official title documents with the county seal. "This lake, the water you swim in, fish in, and bring your families to, it's under my ownership. I hold the title to the entire lake." For a moment, the room went silent. Even the angriest voices stopped mid-sentence. The board members sat frozen, their confidence gone, their eyes darting toward one another in panic. Neighbors gasped, some smiling, some looking stunned, as the realization sank in. The very rules they had been threatened with had no real power over the lake. But before the board could react, the man who had exposed their finances stepped forward again. "If that's true," he said carefully, Then every permit, every fine, every so-called lake fee they've collected over the years might not just be unfair. It might be illegal. The crowd exploded once more, this time not with fear, but with outrage. Suddenly, the hoe wasn't just powerless, it was under suspicion. And as I looked around at the faces of my neighbors, I realized the biggest twist of all. My fight over a simple boat had turned into the unraveling of the entire hoe itself. In the days after that explosive meeting, the neighborhood felt different. For the first time since I moved in, people came by not to complain, but to thank me. Some were relieved to finally see the HOA's grip loosening, while others admitted they had long suspected something was wrong, but never had the proof or the courage to stand up. The man who revealed the missing funds worked with a group of neighbors to file official complaints with the county, and an investigation quickly followed. Suddenly, the board members who once strutted around with authority were the ones avoiding eye contact, their confidence gone. As for the lake, everything shifted. Families who had quietly followed every restrictive rule now felt free to enjoy it without fear of fines. Kayaks, fishing boats, and paddleboards filled the water again, laughter carrying across the surface. What had once been a place of tension turned back into what it should have always been, a shared space for the community to enjoy. My boat, the very thing that started it all, stayed right where I had docked it, and no one said a word. The real surprise came when neighbors began suggesting something I hadn't expected, that I use my ownership of the lake to set fair and simple guidelines, not rules meant to control, but ones that kept the lake safe and open for everyone. It wasn't about power, it was about restoring balance and trust. I agreed, knowing that the real victory wasn't about winning against the hoe, but about giving the community back their voice. Looking back, what started as a fight over one boat became a turning point for an entire neighborhood. The lake wasn't just water anymore. It was proof that standing up for what's right can change everything.